Thomas Lloyd III. What is your question, please?
Hey, good evening. Thank you so much to all the speakers. I have a logistical question for you that I like to ask. I'm a newish member. I joined Speak Up Toastmasters a few months ago. Logistically speaking, how do you prepare for a speech, whether it's a contest or not? And what I mean by that is, what do you have in front of you? Do you have a general outline in front of you? Do you have 3 key points, as I saw with your PowerPoints? Do you have key phrases you want to add in? And then on the and as well, how much do you practice those? I find I can over practice and become too stiff and get more nervous by over practicing my speeches. So I'm wondering about input on both of those aspects.
I can speak into that for a moment. Whenever I'm preparing a speech, and your name is Thomas. Thomas, I always determine, first of all, how I want people to be different after they listen to me. What I want them to be how I want them to be different, and as a result of being different, what they would be doing different in their lives, like to create impact. First of all, you want them to remember you too, and that's going to create them remembering you. From that point, I look back and I say, what stories in my life do I have? Because storytelling is huge in speeches if you want people to remember you. Storytelling is huge. And I ask myself, do I have a story that relates to how I want people to be different after listening to me? And that's where I start, with a story and how I want people to be different. And then you craft it into whatever, the 3 spot parts, or, not run on, make sure you leave out all the ahs and ums. And then you practice. And practicing isn't enough, because like you heard earlier, you need to be different. So practice, get feedback, rewrite it. Deliver it, get feedback, rewrite it. Deliver it, get feedback, rewrite it. Do that as many times as you possibly can before the contest. And that's what I'd say to do.
Thomas, Francisco here. I didn't include it in my speech, but do the boring part first. Meaning, what got me interested in humor in this venue was that my pathway, presentation mastery, one of the electives was get to know your sense of humor. And I thought, oh, cool, I can knock off a speech and see if I do have a sense of humor. And it was so detailed that at first it was like, oh, I don't want to read that, it's boring, nerdy, but the detail was amazing. Like, the tip I got from it was, don't start with a joke. You don't have to start with a joke, because if you bomb, that negative energy will stick with you and you'll ruin the whole point of being humorous. Later on, I Googled the guidebook, the contestant guidebook. I asked for a sample ballot, and all of that nerdy detail really helped. And okay, so there's so much to talk about, so many funny things. It channeled it into, okay, it has to be somewhat proper humor. It can't be nasty, as I mentioned earlier. It can't be dirty humor in this venue. So if you're having trouble, read the project.
Thank you both. Appreciate it.
All right. Letitia, you were the next person to raise your hand.
Yes, I have a question. This is how to make your speech memorable. Or what is the best way to make your speech more memorable to the audience? Are there any techniques? Yes,
I can.
That's it.
Maybe jump in there. I think I heard the question as how to make your speech more memorable, right?
Yes, correct.
Great question, great question. For me personally, what I've found that works is a speech is memorable when you put, what's unique about yourself into it, how you think, your personality, because no one else can, do the same thing or say the same thing or think the way you think uniquely. So the more of yourself that you put into it, the more of your own personal passion that you show, the more memorable it'll be, because they'll remember it because it came from you, and they'll notice how you are unique.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
And the next person who raised her hand is Naomi Carrington Hockman.
Good evening. This question is for Linda. I'm curious about the technical and logistical aspects of your virtual submission to the World Championship of Public Speaking. I'm curious about, we have a lot of contestants that sit and deliver their speeches. Some choose to stand. You, brave soul, used props with the placards, lighting, virtual backgrounds, all those things we have to take into consideration for the upcoming World Championship of Public Speaking because of virtual delivery. Do you have any recommendations or pointers or a 6-step process or anything like that?
Oh, thank you. And your name is Naomi? Naomi. Thank you, Naomi. Well, here's what I did. I said, what are the rules? And then I threw them out. They told me, don't make sure you don't have anything in your background, just a plain background. And I said, I like these pictures behind me. I'm leaving my pictures because my hair is so blonde that, and this used to be white, right? Against the white, the camera had trouble like focusing on where's the wall and where's you. So I had these paintings behind me that at least were darker. And now I've actually put this up, which is really helpful. But that worked for me. Now, everybody else was like, oh, she's not listening to what they're saying, because we had meetings ahead of time with the production people. So I just said, oh, look, I'm going to do what works for me. Now, when it comes to the placards, it wouldn't have worked on a stage. This doesn't work on a stage. It only worked because we were in the virtual world. And on a stage, those things would have gotten lost. Plus, I experimented, like I said. At first, I had thought I would say something, and then I'd go like this. But that didn't work because that's like I was keeping it a secret from myself instead of this was like about me. So that was part of it. So I say people will say what to do, how to do it, what kind of background you need to have, what your props should be, how big your props should be. Oh, there was a lot of conversation about how big your props should be. I say forget all that. You have to do what works for your message. And if you do that, I didn't go there to win, which is probably why I came in second. I went there to give my message to the world, and I used whatever I needed to do to make that happen. So if you're working on something and you have a message and there's something you're questioning, do you want to include it or not? Reach out to me. I'll call you. We can get on a Zoom call. You can try different backgrounds and I'll tell you, if I think it works for you or not. Ask other people. But forget about what all the rules are, because all those people following the rules, they don't always get to the top. Well, in fact, 3 of the rules were don't talk about religion, politics, or anything in the news. So you see what I did with that rule. I didn't listen to that one at all. So that's the advice I'd give you. So forget the rules, do what works for your message.
Do you have a response to as well, Francisco?
Technically, yeah. I feel like I worked so hard in the past 6 years to be comfortable in front of a real live audience and to make eye contact, to work the room. And now we're here on Zoom. And as I mentioned earlier, try to mimic people whose style you like. If you've seen like Anne-Marie or someone else, maybe at work, who, if they're sitting down and they make that work, do that. And I think somebody already said it before, don't let the, I should stand up, limit you. In fact, earlier at my meeting today, I tried my speech standing up. I felt more comfortable, more energy. But since I can't see well the gallery view for the timer, and play around with the keyboard at this, like from a distance. I was like, I'll just sit down this time, and it can deter your energy. But then again, if you're worried about, like controls and what's in my background, don't choose the least hazardous of the two.
Thank you. George Alwan has been patiently waiting. George, can you go ahead and ask your question?
Sure. My electronic hand wouldn't raise, so I'll raise my personal hand. I have a question, and it's both for Anthony and perhaps Corey. Anthony, you talked about passion, creativity, and purpose. In a 2-minute speech, could you walk us through how you applied those three to a 2-minute speech? And in a way, the same question is for Corey, even though it's how Anthony applies it, but how do you move that into 2 minutes? And it's more the creativity than the passion.
So luckily with the table topics, pretty much any answer you give is going to be creative. But if you want to take it a step above, try to think of the answer that people are not expecting you to say. Because if you really think about it, and I actually typed this in the chat, but I did a lot of practice table topics, or table topics questions before the actual competition, which kind of makes you, fire sharply on your creativity muscle. Just like, your legs or your arms, I feel like creativity is a muscle that you can stretch and you can grow it. There's not really a specific, baseline of you're creative this much and you're never going to grow. You can actually work that muscle. So the more questions you do, the more times you try to put yourself in that space, it allows you to think more outside of the box, answer what people wouldn't expect, but still give, an adequate answer to whatever the question may be. And as far as in 2 to 3 minutes, you really have to limit yourself to how many key points you make, and you have to kind of curb your speech around those, 1 to 2 key answers to the question, and be succinct. When it comes to table topics, I think a main thing that may get people is, your ability to be concise. You're not going to have a lot of time to give a long drawn out answer. So you want to be as straight to the point as possible, but you want to add, those creative points, those points that make you that maybe no one else would have thought of, and the way you thought of it, within that first 30 seconds to a minute.
I agree with pretty much everything Anthony said. The one thing I would add is that to help guide you, when I do table topics and when I write an evaluation, the first thing I try to decide is, what is my message going to be? What's the one thing that I want the listeners to walk away from? It has to be something that I feel is important for them to know. And we all have those things. We all have those things where if you give me 30 seconds or 60 seconds or 120 seconds, I've got something to say. So I decide which thing I want to say that gives me passion, that gives me purpose. And then creativity is more difficult. Definitely listen to Anthony's advice about how to let your own creativity and style out when it comes to delivering that message. Decide on your message, make it one that's important to you. And like Anthony said, you have to scale the content. Today I had 10 minutes, so I was able to give one large message that had messages about improvement and speech writing and attitude in it. In a 2-minute speech, maybe I have time for one of those main points, maybe just one of the speech writing principles. So you have to scale it to your time limit.
Thank you. Albina, you're next. What's your question, please?
Hi, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My question for any of the speakers is that, what is your speech writing process? When you initially get that, oh, this can be a speech, then how do you create your speech? That's my question. What's your speech writing process? Was I audible? I don't know.
I don't know if I'm the only one who writes their speeches down. if they're under 10 minutes, I write it out. At first, I go with my 3 points. I can do this, blah, 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 blah. But then all of us can tell when the person's thinking, when the speaker's thinking, or they catch themselves saying the wrong thing and realizing they made a mistake. When that happens, I write it down, because in the book, there's no filler words. Even the the pauses, they're purposeful in the book and they create a beautiful story. I write it down. Writing things down also helps me find the best word to use, the best synonym, the most outrageous word that makes sense to then say it aloud. Oh, it's time consuming. It's the long way around probably, but I like to write mine down, memorize it to the point where I won't forget my 3 points, but of course, not like be robotic about the delivery. The delivery has to be just practiced. But if you have the time and you like words, write as much of it as you can.
I'll jump in on this one too. I have a kind of a crazy process. I walk in, so when I go walking, I have my phone with me. And first of all, I listen to my speech writing song, which is called Champion by Carrie Underwood and Ludacris. They do a song together. You should listen to it. It's a great song. So I listen to that first to kind of just get me pumped up. And then I record into my phone just segments of talking that I think may have interest, that may be related to the topic. And if it doesn't work, when I get home, they throw those away. I go back and listen to pieces of it. And then I do the exact same thing. I write everything out. And then I count the words. I put it in Word and I count the words because I know how many words I can speak powerfully in 7 minutes. And I don't speak one word more than that. Else you just end up rambling on. So that's what my process is. So it just kind of gets the creative juices going to listen to a great song and then go out and walk and record yourself talking.
You might have noticed that everybody has different processes, which makes sense because we're all different people. What you should do is, like a lot of my colleagues here have suggested, imitate the speakers that you like, try what they do, and then that'll give you inspiration to keep what you like, change the things you can improve, and not keep what you don't like. For me, I usually don't write my speeches down. I start with message. From there, I outline message, break it down into my main points, break those down into sub points, jokes, and transitions. So all the things I want to make sure I say. And then if I have those roughly 10 things clear in my head, I'm not going to forget them, and I'll be able to fill in the information that I already know that's important to me in between those points. For me, I find that lets me, especially as I'm improving the speech, change how I get from point to point and try different things until I find the way that I like to do it. But that's my process. Try it if you like to, try some of the other suggestions, keep what you like, improve it if you can, keep working.
Okay, last call for questions. Rich Lemmer, you're next.
Okay, it occurs, excuse me. It occurs to me that the 4 contests can be broken down into 2 groups. The humorous and international are definitely prepared. The evaluation and table topics are much more impromptu. So I would be curious as to whether you feel like there is a significant difference in how you prepare for the 2 different, say, general categories of contests. If there's a difference in preparing for the more impromptu presentations than for the more prepared presentations.
I would say that that's a great way to phrase these 2 categories. And with both categories, give yourself permission right now, when you have the time at home in your private life, in your mind, about things that you're willing to share with the world or with people. Meaning, if you're not ready to talk about your immigrant story, what it meant, what literally it took to get here, like this is my case, if you're not ready there, don't. But if you're willing to talk about like your sexual orientation, your parts of your private life, just do that mentally and emotionally, because whether a speech, a prepared speech, or an impromptu table topic, it will come like that. Like the answer will come quickly. And then if it gets emotional or kind of weird, it's okay. You at least you gave yourself permission to say, that's a topic, or that's a personal thing that I'm willing to talk about in front of others. And whether prepared or not, it comes out beautifully, hilariously sometimes, and then genuine, because people can tell that, oh, you're comfortable talking either intimately about something or being wacky. So start with all the things about you that you're willing to share and go with it.
Okay, there aren't anybody else that's
I have
raised.
a question, Tony.
Okay, go ahead.
If I may. Thank you, Tony. This is a question for Corey. I've heard this question many times before, especially from new members of Toastmasters, but I'm curious to see how you will answer it, Corey. And it is, how do you find recommendations for a speaker who just gave a speech that appears perfect? So how do you find what to recommend when it seems that they did such an amazing job with the delivery and everything else, and you're just like, not finding what to recommend? So how do you deal with that situation?
It's a really good question, and there isn't a universal answer to it. Part of it is attitude. So when I give an evaluation, I'm not looking for what they did wrong, because I'm not looking to criticize. I'm not looking to tell them what they're bad at. I'm looking for things that they can improve. Now, if they did do something wrong, then great, I can talk about it. But even then, I'm not criticizing. I'm not providing critical feedback. I'm providing constructive feedback, not what they did wrong, but what they can change, improve, do better. And that same mindset then helps when you're trying to look at somebody who's already a very good speaker. They might not have done anything wrong. You can still ask yourself, okay, but how can they do better? Maybe not technically, but how can they make the speech more memorable, more impactful, more organized? I've had the pleasure of evaluating Kevin Snyder several times, who is a professional speaker and never makes mistakes. So challenging myself to say, okay, what does he care about? He cares about connecting with his audience. So were there any opportunities during his speech where he could have connected more? He cares about being memorable. He knows he's a good speaker, but he wants to be memorable and well-known on a world-class scale. So what feedback can I give him to make himself not just a good speaker, but one that stands out even among a class of world-class speakers? Those types of questions lead to the feedback that I can give a speaker like that.
Thank you.
All right. There aren't anybody else that's raised their hand, but there's been a couple of questions in the chat room. Kathy, did you want to go ahead and ask your question to the speakers? I can go ahead and ask on your behalf. The question is, for table topics, how do you improve your ability to be creative, funny, and memorable on the spot?
Yes, so I kind of gave a little bit of an answer in the chat to try to get something in case you had to drop. But, like I kind of said, there's, for me, I create sort of a skeleton speech. I go over the main point or the main 2 points I want to make, and then I kind of fill in the blanks with, personality, creativity. I try to think of ways that may not be the immediately available answer, but still a way to answer the question, even if I'm answering it indirectly. And I think for me that has what's helped to keep it kind of funny and memorable, while also adding a bit of personality into it. As I mentioned earlier too, for me, I think creativity is sort of like a muscle. You can kind of work it out, you can stretch it, you can grow it, but you have to practice it. You have to make it stronger.
And there was a question in the chat room from Ramsey. Any suggestions for non-native English speakers?
You have to be able to speak clearly enough for people to understand what you're trying to say, but by no means should your accent or even the way you phrase your sentences, that shouldn't deter what you're trying to say. In fact, an accent, the way you speak, the sentence structure can really add to that genuineness. As I competed and went to other, that's the other thing, go to other contests, as many contests as you can, just as an observer go. I noticed amazing, hilarious speeches from fellow foreigners. And like in my mind, I could understand them. As long as they can understand what you're saying, for the most part, it comes across so genuine, so unique, like their worldview, their own experience. Even if somebody says, oh yeah, I grew up in a good family, I'm religious, blah, blah, blah. Like to hear their perspective and their own accent, their own sentences is so cool and engaging.
And to add to that, I'm a native English speaker, but something I've just noticed in some of my counterparts that are not, native English speakers is the power of a pause. And, this goes for anyone who is doing a speech, non-native English or not. But I think when you are trying to kind of translate in your mind while also speaking, at times you may be forced to pause, but I think that can actually make your speech sound very powerful. It's actually something that I've noticed Francisco doing. He does really well. I don't know if you're doing it on purpose, Francisco, or you're thinking, but I think as you're pausing while you're speaking, it just makes it sound very effective. And it makes the messages that you are sending very clear. So I think if you're able to add those pauses and watch the the speed and kind of the intonation in your speeches, I think it makes a huge difference, and it can be a huge strength.
All right, I don't see
One
anything.
more question.
Go ahead.
This is for Fernie. If you said during your presentation about the PCP, the first thing was passion. How do you show passion if you happen to get a topic that you either don't care or just not passionate about? So how can you show passion for that?
You kind of have to dance around it a bit. If you get a question about, this is kind of a rudimentary way to explain it, but if you get a question about how much you like to play on a slide, if you're in a playground, but you like playing on a swing, then you could say, hey, yeah, the slides are okay, but the swings are really where it's at. Like you can kind of divert the question a little bit. And I think the passion just comes out in when you share something, some aspect of the question that is important to you, something that you do find passion in. And depending on how you look at it, you can almost find passion in any activity you do. You just kind of have to search for it a little bit. It may take a little bit of brainstorming, which is kind of hard in a table topic speech because you only have, a minute or so, but there's always a way you have to just kind of keep an open mind.
Last call for questions. All right, I'd like to go ahead and thank our 4 speakers. Thank you for sharing your tips and your learnings. This has been very interesting and very educational for me. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our Zoom master and our district director, Ramona Baylor.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to all of our speakers, champions, lovely people, fabulous Toastmasters. I just go on and on and on. But thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. I've seen in the chat that you're enjoying this. Maybe there'll be a part 2. Who knows? Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Tony and Bernie and Rich, for putting this together. We really enjoyed it. And thank you again to our lovely speakers this evening. Have a good night, and I'll see you on the Zoom. And this is being recorded. It'll be on the D117 YouTube channel. Come see us there. See you guys.
Good night. Good night.
Bye.
Night.